Welcome to the DFO Rundown podcast with Frank Seravalli and Jason Gregor on dailyfaceoff.com. Delivered by DoorDash.
Welcome to episode 115 of the DFO Rundown. I'm Jason Gregor in snowy Alberta, and Frank is joining us from a beach in Florida. So, Frank, I could Will Smith you right now just for that, but I won't because I'm a better human. So, how you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, before we jump into anything, do you think that was real or do you think that was staged?
Oh, I think that was. I don't know what benefit you'd get from staging that.
Yeah, in fact, the only thing is, if it was real, he's just opened himself up to an assault charge.
Yeah, and I don't think. Well, it sounds like Chris Rock isn't going to do anything, but yeah, that was. I don't really understand it. And I understand that his wife has she can't. Her hair falls out, so I understand it. But it's a GI Jane joke. It's not even that bad. Like, man, I've heard bald jokes 1,000 times. Like, hey.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if anyone, you're used to it.
Yeah, like I thought it just seemed to go from 0 to 100 pretty quick for no reason. So yeah, Frank, we're definitely not going to be Will Smith or Chris Rock anything. Happy for you that it's Bommy. You're there, of course, for the GM meeting. You had the big article last week about LTIR, and that I think is the hot topic this week amongst the GMs.
Yeah, there's no question that it's certainly going to be a big topic of conversation because I think, look, there's a number of teams that were really upset with how not just the Nikita Kucherov thing played out. I think a lot of people looked at that as a one-off scenario. Like, how many times is there going to be a shortened 56-game season where you can line up the injury perfectly? I think people started to get more upset with the Mark Stone injury in Vegas. Not to say that it's not legitimate, but I think a lot of teams felt like Vegas made that trade for Jack Eichel knowing that they had Mark Stone in their back pocket and never actually had any real ideas or push around moving someone from their roster to be cap compliant, that this was always going to be their path forward in terms of trying to get all those guys activated. And the irony in all of it is that as they get through this, well, first off, they may not make the playoffs, which makes it there is no loophole if there is no playoffs. And the other part is, well, you look at their roster and not getting the Dadonov trade finished, it's a real stretch for them to activate Mark Stone. They'd have to line up everything kind of just right or perfectly. And even then, people are curious if Mark Stone will even end up being activated this season because that back injury really seems to be quite serious.
Yeah, like it seems like such an easy solution to just say, okay, and you know what, even going with the 20-man roster, and I understand why, because certain teams, for those who don't understand the workings of the salary cap, every day you accrue, and you can actually accrue some savings. So some teams that do accrue it over the year at the deadline, they can actually add a guy, who's a little bit more that will help them. So technically you could have a team that was maybe 1.5 over the cap in salary after the deadline, but it would be an accrued all season long. So your suggestion of a 20-man roster instead of 23, right? So even if it's 3 guys at league minimum, Frank, there's 2.25 mil, right? So those guys aren't on the roster, and there's not like there's a ton of teams that have 3 guys at league minimum anyway. So I don't see it really being a big concern for teams. What's your feel on the GMs wanting to make this paper trade? Because it doesn't change anything really other than, because it's not like you're getting paid suddenly in the playoffs. It's just to create more of a fair balance for teams.
Yeah, I think the real problem here is, as much as they would like to do it, and as much as I believe the NHL itself, meaning the head office, feels like there is a need to make some kind of fix, I think the big reminder for everyone that's been clamoring for this is it's a material change in the collective bargaining agreement, and they can't unilaterally make the change without bargaining with the NHLPA. And the fact that this has come up and the fact that it's been so public, you've sort of broadcasted to the PA that you'd like to do it. Obviously, they would like something in return. That's how bargaining works. And I don't know what, if anything, the NHL is willing to give up in order to make that happen. And on top of that, I'm not sure how much there is an appetite from players to really make something like this happen. You hear Dougie Hamilton complain last year about losing to a team that was a $98 million team. Well, the other part of that is that means that there's just more players that have been able to get paid. Someone's on LTIR, it's just more space for someone else. At the end of the day, financially, it actually hurts the players to have teams exceeding the cap because it's just more of the owner's 50-50 share that they're cutting into. But at the end of the day, it's jobs, and that's really what matters to players. So I'm not sure how big their appetite is personally to make a change. So that's the other part of it. It's not just a unilateral decision here. It would have to be bargained, and that makes things pretty tough.
Yeah, well, most of these guys, if you're on LTIR, you've already got your contract anyway. So it's just basically eliminating teams that are going to add more of those guys that are injured, right? The money's still going to be in the pot. It just might not be all in 10 people's pockets kind of thing. So I understand, but you're right. Negotiation and bargaining is one thing. So we'll see. Anything else you think is going to be a significant topic this week?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of minor issues, and I'm interested to see what else managers bring to the table. I think there's been some talk about illegal line changes is one thing that popped up. I think they're going to touch on the coach's challenge again and see, look at the numbers. Is it working? I think there's more minor things to that end. You saw a long change in overtime. We actually talked about it on the Daily Faceoff show a couple of weeks ago. Mike McKenna hit on it. I think it was the Anaheim Ducks that executed it perfectly. Player in one door, out the other. Those are the types of little things in the game that they're looking at that I believe popped up onto the agenda. But, there's going to be a host of other updates from people external from the NHL or I guess internal from hockey ops, external from hockey ops, I should say. Someone like Kim Davis, the NHL Senior Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion. She's got an incredibly long and interesting and impressive title. But she's going to be giving another update on where things stand with regards to the training program that the NHL was supposed to put in place. It was actually supposed to be active for NHL players to begin getting training by the end of March. There's been a delay in that program that's been pushed back until next season. They're also going to get an update from the NHL Alumni Association and their leader, Glenn Healy, who we had on the pod a few weeks back. Glenn Healy is here, and he'll get in front of the GMs to remind them, look, we've seen a number of issues pop up already in the NHL this season. Think of Carey Price was maybe the highest profile player to enter the NHL assistance program. His point is, look, let's start to get these guys help now so that, when they're alumni, they also recognize that you have the ability to step up and ask for help. As part of, being an NHL player and being an NHL alumni. So, to get in GMs, get in front of them, get in front of players and say, we're here to help you as just another avenue or path to get people help.
And then, Frank, of course, you're likely just going to slip a few pieces of paper under the door to remind them that 4 in each division should be no crossover for the playoffs, right?
I'll see what I can do. I think the submissions needed to be in a few weeks ago. I know you said it's an easy change, but it would kind of, I guess, does it involve any sort of complex language? Like, you're only asking for it if 4 teams qualify from each division?
Yeah. If there's no crossover, everybody stays in their division.
Okay. So, and I know that this hasn't happened often, but my response to you is, what happens if there is a gap between number 7 and number 8? What happens then? Or what happens if 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 are all from the same division? Do you really think that there shouldn't be crossover?
But keep in mind that back in I would argue to that, when there used to be 3 divisions, well, they still have, when there used to be 3 divisions, remember the South, that used to be called the South Least for the longest time, because you'd win the South Least and you'd have like the 6th most points, but you'd finish 3rd. So they've had precedence in that, but here it's, you know what, if you're the number 1 team and you finish with whatever points, to me, now in the East, it's not as big of a deal because the travel's just not the same. But you can have Pacific teams and Central teams that are traveling, way farther now, sometimes based on 2 points. And I'm just not sure over the course of 82 games if 2 or 4 points ultimately is that much of a difference, right? Like, should Colorado get punished and suddenly have way more travel because they were the best team?
Well, the other part of it is, should they get punished and have a potentially way better team?
But if we kind of go like back in the day, one was always versus, right? It's 1 versus 8 and 8
It
to
wouldn't be
7.
1 versus 8. That's my point. Is it could be 1 versus 5 now instead of 1 versus 8, and that's not necessarily fair for having the best record in the entire conference. You should get, by theory, if there's 8 teams in the tournament, you should get the lowest points percentage team,
Yeah.
the lowest team that racked up the lowest points.
Well, I'll go look and I'll have it for next week. I'd like to know historically, what's the gap between 7 and 8?
I feel like this would be a good article to put on dailyfaceoff.com.
Yeah. But you know what? I have written about it. Did you know that the gap, Frank, since the 2000s, only twice has there been a gap between 8th and 9th of more than 5 points? Once was 6, and then another time in way back in 2003, it was 13 in the West. And you look at the East this year, it might crush that. We've like in 22 years, you've never seen a gap from 8 to 9. And the thing is, 8 and 7 and 8 right now, Boston and Washington are very close, right? They're separated right now by 3 points. Although Boston does have a game in hand. So, but to me, the bigger story is why there's such a disparity between the 8th and 9th team in the East. And we could say actually that we might have seen this coming. If you base it on last year, there was huge gaps in all 4 divisions from non-playoff teams to playoff teams. And this is going to be something I'm going to watch, Frank. Are we seeing more of a separation in the NHL right now of good teams?
Because you think teams decide to what? Sell?
Not even sell, because look at the East. Like the East, were they selling in November? That was over. Like, I'm wondering if we're seeing a lot of really good teams right now and just a lot of bad teams who are like, well, you know what? Now Philly was a disappointment, but if you look at Montreal, Ottawa, well, New Jersey, you know, how good were those teams? Columbus, maybe we thought would be better. Obviously the Islanders, but there's a lot of teams in the East right now that if I look in the offseason, how can any of those non-playoff teams significantly improve?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, you know, it's funny. We talked all season about how there really isn't much of a playoff race because the 8 teams have been decided. But I got to tell you what is going to really interest me over the next 6 weeks or so is that race for what the playoff matchups look like.
Yes.
Because Boston has really closed the gap in a significant way. They're right there. And, you know, maybe Tampa, which I don't think it's likely, but Tampa could be in that spot where they finish 4th.
I know, it's crazy. Yeah, it's the East playoff race is not. You're right. The seeding race is fantastic for matchups. You know what? The playoff race in the West is definitely, you know, Vegas is clinging on the edge right now. Them and Dallas, although Dallas has still got all these games in hand. Now I wonder, you know, they're going to have to compress that in a significant period of time, clearly, right? So will Dallas lose some of that advantage because they're playing so many games in a short period of time here?
Yeah, I was going to say Dallas really hasn't. They've done Vegas some favors. They haven't closed the door. Like, they've had an opportunity here with a number of games to pull away or pull ahead by a significant margin. They haven't done it. So they're kind of scratching and clawing to get in that final spot. As it's one of the best quotes of the year, by the way. Daryl Sutter saying, "Whoever plays Colorado is a waste of 8 days." You know, I would love to see, not that of course, Dallas, fine. They've been in that driver's seat, but I would love to see Vegas get hot, because I think if they get everyone on the ice for a playoff matchup, they're one team that if they were to get Colorado, they could make it really interesting, I think.
Well, plus then, Frank, if they got all the players on the ice, people would be screaming bloody murder about LTIR. So it would
which is why we're here.
Yeah, it would be a big story. Now, speaking of the Avs, you saw them in Minnesota, and, you know, Nathan McKinnon goes after Matt Dumba. Right now, man, like Colorado, we've seen that, you know, they seem to want to be more of a stand up for one another team. Right, we've seen that twice from McKinnon here recently. Minnesota's a big physical team. Nashville, a big physical team. Like the Central might be the most physical division in hockey right now amongst those top 4 teams, those top 3 teams for sure. And then the Blues play a big, heavy game as well.
Yeah, and that's a big reason why we did this roundtable on dailyfaceoff.com on Friday, where we all submit our cup final matchup. it'd be easy to take the Colorado Avalanche because I'm just not a big fan of picking the chalk. It'd be easy to say that team, of course, is going to make it to the Cup final. If there is one team aside from Calgary that has a real chance to knock off Colorado, I believe it's Minnesota for that physical nature of their game. They are big, they're mean, they're hard to play against. And when they play to that identity that made them successful through the first 50 games of the season, I think they're as good as anyone in the West.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed watching them lately. Bill Guerin, I think he pushed his chips all in, knowing the cap hell they're going to be in over the next 3 seasons. And Nashville, Tanner Jeannot, guest friend of the show, became a proud father for the first time. Then he had the Gordie Howe hat trick yesterday, including the game winner. Like the Preds, the race for there we talked about in the Atlantic, Frank. But you look at St. Louis, Nashville, and Minnesota. It's basically identical to see who's going to finish second and third, and then in the wild card spot. And for them, who's ever the wild card spot there most likely is going to face Calgary. So that's not an easy test.
By the way, you saw the Jeannot fight. So it's one of my favorite, little nuggets. Is I've mentioned the other day on our show that Hayden Hodgson is a guy that signed with the Flyers. He was playing in their AHL affiliate without an NHL contract, spent the last 5 seasons in the ECHL. A couple of teams had mentioned to me that they thought that Hayden Hodgson is an exact clone of Tanner Jeannot, and that's why a number of teams were interested in trying to sign him. He gets to the NHL last week, plays his first game in St. Louis, has a goal and an assist in his first NHL game. And then who does he fight on Sunday? The guy that he's been compared to, which, I love. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, it's a good comparison right now because Tanner Jeannot's living his best life right now. Everything is turning up positive for him.
But that's what everyone has looked at, Jay. Everyone has been going through saying, where can I find the next Tanner Jeannot?
Yeah, wow. I think that's a lot hard. You want to find them, I get it, but they're rare. I think I would say they are definitely rare. This weekend, Frank, it was some great performances for certain fan bases and some absolutely ugly ones. If you're a Detroit Red Wing fan, how about the Red Wings? I think it was Dmitry Filipich who put it out. The Red Wings have allowed now from 0 to 11 goals against every number this year. Like, my goodness. Now they got shelled 11-2 by the Pittsburgh Penguins on the weekend. They just seem to be playing out the string in Detroit. And then the Edmonton Oilers, they allowed 9 goals to the Flames, all of them 5-on-5, Frank. Since the NHL tracked 5-on-5 goals against, only once. That was the Penguins season opener in 2017 when they lost 10-1 to the Blackhawks. Did a team allow more than 9 5-on-5 goals? And I went back to the history of the Oilers. That tied their franchise record of allowing 9 way back in 1986. In 11-9 loss, they allowed 9 goals. So it just like you allow a lot of goals, but usually, they're sprinkled in where the other team's power play is shredding you. The Edmonton Oilers, like you look at some of their top guys. Cody Ceci was -5. He played 12 minutes 5-on-5. Nurse, Kane, McDavid, and Draisaitl were all -4, and they played between 13 and 15 minutes 5-on-5. Like it was an ugly game for a team that in the first 21 games with Jay Woodcroft, they averaged 1.71 goals against at 5-on-5, which was 6th best in the league. They were doing really good, and then they just fell apart. That was an ugly game on Saturday night for the Oilers defensively.
Yeah, I mean, can we talk for a second about Mikko Koskinen, or is that unfair?
100%.
Big
yes.
Stretch of that. 5 goals on 12 shots? I texted Tyler, who was at the game, and I said, he looks like a fish out of water. Like, first off, full credit to Johnny Gaudreau because he saw things and did things with the puck that very few guys in this league can. Like, going back to some of those goals, like how did he see some guys on the drop pass? Like you can see his path to the net. I don't know when that vision would come in because they're so far out of the picture. Special plays, but at the same time, Koskinen, come on, man, get a save. Like just get a glove on something, get in front of something.
Frank, there was a lot of people that were, Mikko Koskinen, when Woodcroft came in, he played well for a bit and everybody got excited. And I was like, okay, that, hey, guys can get on runs. But if you look at Mikko Koskinen, and if you're a believer in trends, he is trending the wrong direction. In his last 8 games, his save percentage is .877. And it just goes lower if I go to like down to 5 games, and it's .854. Like it's not trending the right direction. And I really wonder if at some point the Oilers, because now under Jay Woodcroft, Mike Smith actually has a higher save percentage now at .900 than Koskinen, who's .898. And remember, Koskinen for the first 7 games was like at .930, and everybody was loving him. And I'm like, I'll be a little patient and see. Stuart Skinner's in the American League. I really wonder at some point when they're going to just not be as patient. Like the goalies, no one can say as a goalie in Edmonton that they haven't been given ample opportunity to find their game. And Koskinen now in his last 8 has just trended the wrong direction. Smith came in a tough situation, but he's still, well, there's definitely the one goal I think he'd like back for sure. But I would guess they would start Smith tonight against Arizona, and we'll see. But at some point, I think when Stuart Skinner's lighting up the American League, like, what are you waiting for? At some point, you got to call him up, don't you?
Well, yeah, I think so. And also, look, you can't be day-to-day with hurt feelings anymore, as Chris Pronger used to say. Like, you got to go with the hot hand, and whoever that is, even in that moment, whether it's Skinner at some point, whether it's Smith, I love that Koskinen sort of went he tried to push back against the narrative a few weeks back, saying, why is it that you guys say that I can't sustain it for a while? Well, the facts are the facts. Mm-hmm. We're in this contract, and it's almost played its way through, and he's never really been able to put it all together for a 30-game stretch or a 20-game stretch. It's decent chunks, decent sample sizes of 10 games followed by 10 horrible games.
Yeah, and lately it's not because he's being overplayed, because it's been a 1-1 rotation here now for the last 2 weeks. So he's never had to play 3 and 4 or anything like that. So it's just Mikko Koskinen. I thought you described it perfectly, Frank, because I was sitting in the stands for that game, right behind the net, where the Flames were attacking twice. And the first period with Koskinen, you're just like, what is going on here? Like you mentioned the Tkachuk goal and Johnny Gaudreau. Yeah, that's nice. But Koskinen had no reason to be a fish out of water there, because there was not any reason to have to be scrambling in the first place.
Oh, it was crazy. So were you with Tyler on Saturday night?
No,
Did you see Tyler?
You know what? I did not. I text those guys, but they were in a different section, and I think they were a little bit more pregame lubricated than I was. So
see, that's what I was getting at, because I was hoping I wish we would have had a Tyler Cam at some point, because he messaged me and said he was having a little fun, and I was curious. I wanted to know if he was okay.
Yeah. I think they were all right, but yeah, no, we went down a few of my buddies, one of our good friends' birthdays, so we went out for dinner and went to the game, and then went out afterwards, and but yeah, I don't think I ever caught up to those guys. Well, you know how it is. They were on a bus trip. So their bus left at 11:30. So I'm guessing when they rolled into Calgary, there's a few guys that were already a few beers deep.
Well, I said to him, that's going to be a really painful bus ride home. I hope it was okay for him.
Well, why don't we bring him in for a little fill in the blanks? Ty, how you feeling today?
I'm doing okay. The voice is a little raspy. But we survived. It's always a good time when you can load up a bus of, 40 some odd Oilers fans and make the quick 3.5 hour drive down to Calgary. It was good. The game, while the result maybe wasn't what the bus wanted, it was entertaining. Like, you couldn't ask for much more than that from an entertainment perspective.
Yeah, most goals in the Battle of Alberta in 32 years.
Yeah. The other thing too, I haven't been to like a lot of NHL arenas, but when you go to the Saddle Dome, you quickly realize why that city needs a new barn too. Because comparing that to some of the other rinks I've been to, it's they could use a new rink is all I'm saying there.
When you are in the upper deck at the Saddle Dome, I don't know that there's a worse rink in the league.
Oh yeah, and
you can barely see the ice.
It was rough. Yeah,
the third deck on the one side is not like that's. I give credit for the diehards who sit up there, because you almost need binoculars from that. But the funny thing is, the lower bowl, I like it because you're closer, right? Like the new bowls they've made now, they angle it so far. So if you're in row 25, you seem to be farther from the ice surface. Like I still, to this day, guys, the first time I went to Old Maple Leaf Garden in Toronto, and they had glass right at the end of the rink where the glass came up. There was seats right there, and there was no mesh. And I remember sitting in there being like, "This is unreal," but also like, how many people are losing chiclets up here? There's got to be some, but that, like those old rinks where everything was just closer, I did like it better. Obviously the amenities now, you got wider concourses and food and options like that, but some of the old barns, I think their sight lines were better.
You do lose some character when you upgrade your rink. I'll give them that. The Saddle Dome certainly has a lot of character.
Yeah.
How about this? So I want you guys to picture this. The old Madison Square Garden, before they redid it, maybe like 6-7 years ago, the press box for visiting media was in the fourth row of the lower bowl.
Oh, wow.
Second, third, and fourth row, and you'd be right there. And there was the net, when I went, but for a long time there was no net, and you literally were in play. Like you could be getting a puck right in your lap. Like it was in one of the corners. So like you had to have your head on a swivel all game.
No, yeah, I love it, man.
That's great. All right, let's get into fill in the blankets delivered by our friends at DoorDash with the promo code Rundown. DD gets you 25% off and no delivery fees. I will certainly not be cooking tonight. I'm using DoorDash. You guys were mentioning the Red Wings getting blown out by the Penguins. How about this? In the last 31 days, they've allowed 9+ goals 3 times. That number has only been hit in the NHL 6 times all season by any team. So they've basically accounted for half the blowouts in the last month. It brought up a few questions. I was reading on Twitter, some Wings fans wondering if a coaching change could come. So that is your question. The Red Wings will blank Jeff Blashill. Multiple choice, fire or keep. Frank, what do you think?
Well, I think keep to close out the season. There's no reason to do anything.
Heading into next season, though.
I will say they keep. Just because it isn't that long ago that he signed his last extension.
Yeah.
Is it last year? It hasn't been too long. I'm going to say they keep him, but I think there's been some considerable friction there, at least what I've heard, between coach and some of the younger players, which I think when you're a team that's building towards something, he's been there a long time. It's not necessarily the friction you want to have.
No, that's why I think that he will be gone. There'll be a new head coach in Detroit next season. The way they're finishing, it illustrates, because it's not like, they got a bunch of new guys they're going to bring in. They've got some young players, probably the best rookie in the NHL this season, and they're just getting their teeth kicked in. I think that's a sign that maybe there is need for a coaching change. I agree with Frank to do it now. I guess, well, if you're going to do it in the offseason, you could do it now, but then you're just paying a guy. You would promote your assistant coach for the sake of it, but you could do it either way, because to me, the Wings they've rolled over and died in a lot of those games, and it's been pretty ugly.
Next question I got for you, Jason, you gave your idea, so you're going to have to dig deep on another one here, but if you had the floor at the GM's meeting, your proposal to them for something different would be blank. Frank?
And I don't have anything.
There's not like even a little rule. Like I would take up the trapezoid. I'd be all over that.
Okay, for me, I would just change the way the standings are structured. I think the parity is nice, but I think they've jumbled the standings in a way. It's also not interesting anymore. We've seen a number of years now, this is not the first, where most of the teams, even with the loser point, are out pretty early. And it's so hard to make up ground. I really think you got to go to a 3-2-1-0 system. I've been literally writing about it for a decade, and it's just not something they're willing to consider. They like where it is. It has no chance of success, but that's what I would do.
I would one small tweak. If a guy's helmet falls off, he doesn't have to leave the ice surface.
Yeah, that's a new one that's driven some people crazy recently. So
what's your what makes you say it? Is there one incident that you
well, the overtime game, Edmonton, Colorado, Kadri grabbed Nurse in a headlock and popped his helmet off. He's in the defensive zone, so now Nurse has to leave the ice, and it leads to Colorado scoring the game-winning goal. Guys are playing, and I understand the theory that they think, but you usually guys will fight now, and if their helmet comes off, they still let them fight. Yeah. So you can't let the guys play. Guys don't take pucks or sticks in the face very often. So to me, even if you want to word if somebody else dislodges your helmet, then you shouldn't. Now, I guess if a guy's wearing it loose and it just pops off, but I just felt it's such a rare situation. But you get into the playoffs and you're in the defensive zone and you lose your helmet on the long change, and now you're in the second period and you got to go all the way out or you're in overtime. I think that's going to cost a team a game on something that I'm not sure is that unsafe.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just thought it was one of those rules that actually made sense. Like, we're so concerned about players and head injuries. Like, there are guys that want to get through shifts, and it's like, you shouldn't be going into the corner and making a play without a helmet on. It's not 1994 anymore. It's not 1978. Like, you probably should be wearing one.
It's an interesting debate. Third one I got for you here. The Colorado Avalanche right now, they're sitting at 98 points in their first 66 games. The record since the salary cap era came in is Tampa Bay with 128-point regular season. The others in the top three, you'd have Detroit from 05-06 when they put up 124, Washington from 09-10 when they put up 121. So your question, Colorado will finish the season with blank points. Jason?
Well, I'm looking what I got. 16 games left, so that's a maximum of 32 points. I think the Avs, their head coach even said, he split up Taves and Makar here the other day. Just he's going to experiment with some different things. I'll say they win 10 more games, go 10-6. So they'll finish with like 119 points because one of those will probably be an OTL loss.
All right.
I'm going to go with 122.
122. That's pretty much what they're on pace for. They're on pace for 121.75, I believe, and that would put them third best since the salary cap era. Rolling into our points bet bonus question here, brought to you by our friends at Points Bet Canada. Check them out. Ontario, they are coming. While I was looking up some different numbers, like where Colorado would rank on the list, I got into sorting by who's had the most points total since the salary cap era began. So your points bet bonus question is a trivia question. Do either of you know off the top of your head which franchise has accumulated the most points since the salary cap era? Frank?
My guess would be Detroit.
Jason? You were nodding your head. I think
it's Pittsburgh or San Jose or Boston.
It's the Pittsburgh Penguins, 1,626. They're 18 points up on the second place Washington Capitals, actually, which is something interesting. When you look at who's had the best individual seasons since the cap era, the Capitals make up 3 of the top 5, actually. They've been there's only been 4 teams reach the 120-point mark, and Washington is 2 of them. So some interesting stuff there. I thought I'd throw your way to wrap up another edition of Fill in the Blank delivered by DoorDash.
They got Crosby and Ovechkin, and I guess it's lived up. They've both been pretty good. The Pens, of course, with 4 Stanley Cup appearances, 3 wins.
Well, they also have only missed the playoffs once in the salary cap era, and it was the first year. So pretty incredible streak. By the way, I wanted to mention, since we talked last week about the Norris Trophy and about Roman Josi and the season he's having, we mentioned on the pod Roman Josi at plus 350 to win the Norris. Since we talked about it, it's down to plus 275.
Oh, yeah. I think they figured
out.
Are
we moving lines, Tyler?
Might be, man. It's been an unbelievable run for Roman Josi. And Frank, whether it's fair or not, because Cale Makar still had an unreal year and Victor Hedman has too, I do believe it's if you finish stronger, I think sometimes that can benefit you in the eyes of voters naturally, because they look, hey, the games are like this, the goals per game and everything. It gets a little bit harder in crunch time down the stretch. And
that's my big thing is, what if you're doing and playing your best when the games are a lot harder to win? I think it bumps you up, at least on my ballot. And it doesn't take, if we're talking specifically about Josi, it doesn't take anything away, Jay, from what Makar has done. He's going to hit 30 goals as a defenseman.
Awesome.
He's setting the franchise record in terms of goals for the Colorado Avalanche. And it's been incredibly impressive, but I'm sorry, if Josi has a 100-point campaign, I'm going to have a hard time voting for Cale Makar, because it hasn't happened. It's been 30 some years since we've seen this.
Yeah, well, and speaking of guys who are getting hot again, it seems maybe odd to say it, but you look at Connor McDavid now. 15 of his last 19 games, he has 2 points or more, and he's got a chance tonight to get to 100 points. We need 3 points. We can never nowadays for a game with McDavid, 3 points doesn't seem like a big reach. That would give him 5. He becomes only the 19th guy to have 100 points 5 times in his career, Frank. But the difference is he was way younger than them. Like, I think Connor McDavid has a legit shot to join Lemieux and Gretzky as the only 3 players to have 10 or more seasons of 100 points.
Okay, so I have a question for you that's going to be a little bit scandalous. How do you size up Connor McDavid's year? Has it been what you thought it would be? Has it been a little bit disappointing? Has it been incredibly impressive? Like, I came in with such high expectations. I really thought this was the year that he was going to get to 150. And it's not all about points. He's on pace for 122. The way he started, and then there was just that lull for so long. I was kind of waiting for him to drag the Oilers out of what they were going through. And it never really happened. So I'm kind of having a tough time. I'm not slagging him at all. I'm not taking anything away from him. I know that it's not on him. Everything's on him. How do you size up his year? Like, how would you rate it?
Well, it is fair that because if his season kind of mirrors the Oilers. If you look at their first start, they were 21 or 16-5, and he had 40 points. Draisaitl had 41 at that time. But then for a 15-game stretch, and it's funny because it was 15 games spread out over 2 months because there was postponements and everything. Over that 15-game stretch, both Draisaitl and McDavid were under a point a game. Now, granted, it wasn't like they were under it a lot. McDavid had 13 points in 14 games, and Draisaitl had 13 points in 15 games. So for a lot of players, they'd still be up there, but by their standards and McDavid's, it was definitely lower. And I agree with you, Frank, because they were so hot early on. You felt like, hey, they might push 130 at least, and even we were talking 140. 150 is so ridiculous. Like, there's been very few guys to do it, but it does seem like it kind of changed. Now, McDavid has been quite good again in producing points and not giving up goals or anything like that, other than the last game. But so you're right. I think he set the bar so high that now he's going to score 122 points, and it's almost going to feel like, well, that was an average year for McDavid, which is crazy to say. But I do it, like, he's raised the bar so high, even from last year when he had 100 points in 56 games, that 122, as crazy as it sounds, because he's still going to lead the league in scoring, people are going to be like, oh, I was expecting more.
So how would you answer? Has he met expectations? Has he exceeded them? Has he been
Well, he wouldn't have exceeded them. I think at the end of it, if McDavid finishes, with 120 some points, you look at his goal for against 5-on-5, and that has improved. So you would say, hey, you know what? I think it's been okay. The funny thing is, really, it's because the Oilers' power play for 3 months wasn't very good. And that's because his 5-on-5 point totals were fairly similar, but his power play totals just went down a lot. And because that's where a lot of guys who will get their kind of their bonus points, right? Like, you're not going to be 130 point, 140 point guy unless you're getting a lot of power play points. Like, Lemieux had 70 power play points one year when he had 199 points, 70, or maybe it was even 85. Now that I think about it, I might have to go back and check that. But you know what? To really put up high totals, you're going to have to score in the power play. And for 3 months, the Oilers' power play was under 20%. Right? Like, not awful, but by their standards, not good. So I would say, McDavid's season at the end, now his regular season, because the playoffs, if they win, then it doesn't matter how many points they get. But I think his regular season would be one that was, I'd say, a little bit of a roller coaster. Some big highs and then some lows, like for him, low, which is still high for most people.
Right. Yeah. We're saying his, like, a point a game run is low.
Yeah,
like,
which is
for
crazy
an extended
to say.
stretch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at the Oilers' power play, when it went through that lull, was it purely injury related? Like, how much did they, it feels like Nuge really changes that look.
Well, I could see that, but then of course I crunched all the numbers up until he returned here, and in like the 36 games, he played 25 of them, and when he played, the power play was 19.7. When he didn't play, it was like 16. So it impacted it. But even in the 25 games when he was there, their power play wasn't at the stretch. So I think now that he's back, combined with, they've got their juice going again on their power play. They move it around. And the other thing is, I know people always say, well, you got to do more than have Draisaitl as the shooter. Well, no, he's the best shooter. And so when he's shooting more often, their power play is better. And during the lull, McDavid and Draisaitl didn't shoot the puck as much as they normally do. And so when they shoot the puck, their power play is better. It's all the numbers back it up. It's not, people are like, oh, other teams were taking it away. And I'm like, other teams aren't taking it away. I'm sorry. I don't buy that, because if they would have taken it away, they wouldn't have waited 2.5 years to figure it out. The order players, there was a little bit of stubbornness. Draisaitl missed the net a little bit more, and they got unlucky. They hit, there was a stretch of games where they hit 4 goalposts in a row on the power play. So you're like, hey, if some of those go in, your power play percentage in a small window goes up 3, 4, 6%. So, but I think ultimately now that they're back to Draisaitl shooting, and there's more movement. I felt their power play just got too static. It was standing still, and teams were really starting to press them, and it didn't work. But Nugent Hopkins coming back, I think, from a comfort level gives them some confidence, but their power play had started to come around a little bit even before he came back.
So one of my bold predictions from the start of the year was that the Oilers would have the best power play in the salary cap era. That's not going to happen. But when you look at this year, and I know we touched on some goal scoring and some ridiculous totals earlier in the show, I'm telling you, we haven't talked enough about the Florida Panthers and their ability to score goals. They're on pace for 334 in the regular season, over 4 per game. And the record in the salary cap era is 319. So they're maybe 15 goals north of the record. This team has been, I know, they're your pick. They're your squad. They've got, they're cooking. They've got something going.
Oh, man, Florida and the players they added. And to me, my only concern still about the Cats is Ekblad, right? Like, to lose your best defenseman, if he comes back for the playoffs, then great. But if he doesn't, even in the first round, there's no easy matchup for Florida in the first round, right? Like, you look at all the playoff teams, there isn't an easy matchup. Like no offense to Dallas or Vegas if they're the wild card team. That's an easier game for Colorado than anybody that Florida is going to have to face, whether it's Boston or Washington, or heck, it might be Tampa or Toronto, for goodness sakes, because you don't know what's going to happen there. But Florida's and they're doing it. Their power play is good, Frank, but it's not like crazy, right? Like, you mentioned about the Oilers might have the best, like last year in 2020, they set the salary cap record of 29.5. The Toronto Maple Leafs are at 29.2 right now. Right, like they might be able to set the new standard on the power play, and the Oilers' power play, for as bad as it was for 3 months, it's still third at 26.3. But Florida, Frank, to me, is their 5-on-5 scoring they're so much better than everybody else, and where the majority of the game is played, that's a huge advantage for them. But I still think if you ask Florida, they'll want their power play to get a little bit better, because as Tampa proved the last 2 years, yeah, it's great to be great 5-on-5, and that helps. But having a good power play usually can put you over the top when you're a decent 5-on-5 team.
Yeah, but I think I read something last week that pointed out it doesn't necessarily matter what your power play is clicking at in the playoffs. It still ends up being even strength scoring that can help set you apart. You mentioned Ekblad, high ankle sprain.
Yeah,
those are tricky.
They are.
I don't think he's going to be ready for game one. I heard mid to late round one.
Yeah, see that? And honestly, Frank, like that, imagine that, 2 years in a row, your number one defenseman's not there in the postseason, right? Now, hopefully he gets there. But, I go back to when Colorado lost Eric Johnson, then they lost all their goalies in the bubble. Part of winning is still a lot of just luck of timing of injuries, right? And so I just hope for Florida's sake and I hope it for every team. I always want the teams to be healthy come playoff time. I know guys can play nicked up. That's different. But, Aaron Ekblad in your lineup, even at 80%, is still better than your other options.
Yeah, there's a difference between hurt and injured. We've talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
High ankle sprain is injured. That's hard that's a tough injury. There's no exact precise timeline, and it can really, really be painful.
And it can linger for a long time. So it's brutal. Frank, don't suffer any high ankle sprains jumping in and out of the pool this week at the GM meetings. And I'm curious to see the LTI, of course, is going to be the big story, but you talked about it. Even if they want to change it, it's a bigger issue than that. So I'll be curious if we have anything substantial that's going to come out with any, like, doesn't sound like anything that's going to be changed. Obviously, nothing for this season. Maybe next year, best case scenario.
Yeah, I would say they've got a lot of work to do.
Awesome. Well, Frank, put on the sunscreen. We will talk to you on Friday.
Thanks for listening to the DFO Rundown with Seravalli and Gregor. Keep it locked on dailyfaceoff.com and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from to never miss an episode. Delivered by DoorDash.